Today we are talking the Nigerian economy and politics and policy. Why are things the way they are? We're looking at sectors, agriculture, manufacturing, all of them, and trying to diagnose what is wrong and what can be done. I have on the council with me today Mr. Johnson Chukwu. He's Managing Director of Calvi Asset Management, an investment banking firm. I have Victor Gemoyi. He's Managing Director of Partnership Investment, a capital operator as well, and Professor Wale Ajayi of the Lagos Business School. How do you see political risk and scenarios in 2012?
Political risk is certainly up. I would, however, on balance, say it is slightly up. If I were to characterize the scenarios as we normally do into the 4 quadrants, the chief uncertainties are how the government handles the political issues, security challenge, the politics around succession, and of course the other uncertainty is what is going to happen in the global environment, particularly coming from Europe, that will impact commodity prices, particularly oil. And if you put those with the local factors being number 1, you would have a scenario that looks like in the upper left quadrant, wobble and fumble. In the top right quadrant, take off at last. In the bottom right quadrant, you will have elephant rises. And of course, in the quadrant on the left, at the bottom, you have descent into chaos. Now, many people, I think, unduly exaggerate the issues we have in the country at current. But I do not think that we're going to descend into chaos. And obviously, it looks like the uncertainties around commodity prices are easing because the Europeans are addressing the issue. So I don't think we're going to have a situation where oil prices collapse and the government really has to rise up and Nigerians really have to, rise into their reserves. And I do not think we're going to have a perfect solution where we can say we've solved all the macroeconomic anti-corruption issues, therefore it's take off at last. So I would end up saying wobble and fumble. We're going to have issues, yes, with security, but Nigeria is still a good bet.
Okay, let's go into the economy itself. We've been growing at 7%, but our people are still poor. Victor, what do you think?
Well, the truth is that the growth that we see is not enough for the population the size of Nigeria. And for us to be able to get anything really done, we need double-digit growth. And that growth is not going to come, the way it's going now. Don't forget that most of the growth we have is coming from the oil sector. Areas that we really don't put much into. We will need to hasten that growth. And one of the things that needs to be done, as everybody has said, is to address the unemployment situation. Manufacturing is certainly something to look at. There are so many other little things. Agriculture is another one that is a major area that everybody is now looking at. But we need to do a few things to make these things really work. First of all, if you take the economy as a whole, is very promising. One of the things that you cannot take away from Nigeria is the fact that development and all the problems that we are complaining about means that there are solutions to be put in place, and that will mean growth, and that is going to come whether we like it or not.
Victor's view is we need double-digit GDP growth, and we need some sectors to do better. Now, I happen to have argued several times that even if we have 40% GDP growth, with our current structure of our economy, in which agriculture is submodern, in which we export our crude, rather than refined products, in which we trade in wholesale and retail goods, most of which are imported, that unemployment and poverty may continue. What do you think, Johnson?
I think that's the fundamental aspect of it. The economy, the structure of the economy is such that even if we are growing because of what you call natural factors. Precisely. The growth we are seeing in the economy is coming from agriculture. Not because productivity has improved, but because area cultivated has increased and you have more hands still in the ground. So you still have those who are still in the ground living subsistence level, a level of income, standard of living. So they are still poor, despite the fact that they are producing more. But the fact of the matter is that the structure of the economy is such that...
Let me stop you there. You're talking about agriculture. And that's an area in which we've seen a lot of policy pronouncements in recent times. Are you optimistic about policy regarding agriculture? And I would like to go down in 5 seconds.
Well, the way I would look at it is that if you look at the policy pronouncement where they want to change the value chain in agriculture, it is quite promising. But the fact of the matter is that it's not going to take place in less than 2-3 years.
So we need consistency of policy.
We need consistency of policies.
Possibly consistency of personnel as well.
Yes, over a long period of time, not less than 10 years before you begin to have the impact of those changes. But the structure of agriculture today does not really add to reducing the level of poverty in the economy. And until we have that, and we have the manufacturing sector, today we are talking of more than 23% unemployment rate in the country. Okay, that is quite huge anywhere in the world.
And of 15 to 24-year-olds, the percentage is 37.7%.
So you can be talking of, and the problem is that we don't have an inclusive growth, which a lot of analysts have emphasized. We need to have a structure of the economy that when the economy is growing, it will actually include more people into the employment, into the labor force.
On that aspect of employment and inclusive growth, let's take a break. We'll be back shortly. You're welcome back to the Policy Council. We were talking about agriculture. Victor, what are your views?
I think there are a few things we need to do. Yes, I support him that some of the policy changes lately is moving in the right direction. It's going to take time before it becomes very important. I think what we need to do is to de-emphasize the idea of throwing money at agriculture, because that's what we've always done.
Yes,
agriculture needs financing, but it's not by throwing it on agriculture. Fertilizer policy was a good example. We're spending so much money on fertilizer, but it wasn't getting to anybody who was farming, actually. I think we need to change that. I also believe that we need to take some focus on companies that are already doing agriculture very well and support them. A good example like Okomo Oil, Presco, has a few others like that. Because everything is about organization. You need to organize our agriculture properly. Right now, what we're doing is that everybody is doing whatever they like, and we can't get any real substance from what is going on.
Wale, do you think there is enough of Pesco, Okomo, Obasanjo farms and co to do what we need to do?
We don't have a sufficient number, but we cannot place all our agricultural eggs in one basket. We do have, agriculture is a structured milieu. And whilst we must talk about the big players, who incidentally are more focused on export, we must also think about that inclusive growth. And I think we need to be thinking about cluster-based policies. And I don't think we can do agriculture in terms of all crops. It's better we look at competitiveness and look at specialized areas.
And that's what the policy talks about, focusing on some crops and all of that.
And they have defined some belts for certain products.
Exactly. Let's move to power. I mean, we know about the power sector roadmap. We also know that it's been losing the milestones, and we've shifted from 2011 to April, now to June. Now, finally, we say October or September. But do you believe in the basic structure of the power sector roadmap?
Yeah, absolutely. The basic structure, if it's implemented, certainly will actually transform the energy sector, the power sector, as we call it in Nigeria. The fact of the matter, as long as we're moving away from a public sector-driven power sector, where the incentive system is such that does not encourage efficiency and productivity.
Insufficient investment anyway.
The truth is that when we succeed in privatizing those 17 successor companies, because the transmission company of Nigeria will remain a government monopoly, of course, under a management company. When we succeed in privatizing those companies, we should be able to attract capital and knowledge base.
And management, entrepreneurship
that will actually drive those organizations or entities. Today, we have a situation whereby the incentive system of those who work in those institutions do not even encourage them to be efficient or to be productive. It doesn't matter whether you have light or not. Those that work with those institutions will earn their salaries.
Victor, let's focus on your market, the capital market.
Yes.
Why is it still down? The global crisis ended Well, it was thought to have ended 3 years or so ago.
Well, let us take it this way. First is that if you look at the average, most of the countries that had the same impact came out of it after about 3 years. We are just at that level.
But we had our collapse in March.
Well,
before the rest of the world.
The real thing came in 2009 when it really unraveled after the banking crisis. And the banking crisis was a prolonged one. Don't forget that if you are trying to shrink a banking environment of 26 banks down to where it is at 15, there's a lot of problems. That means that a lot of inconsistency in terms of even confidence that people were not willing to do anything. I think we're at the bottom of it. I mean, each time we say we're at the bottom of it, something else happens. But I think we are finally at the bottom of it.
Okay.
You'll find out that some of the reforms that is being put in place, they are beginning to take shape.
Okay.
I can say
you're talking about the capital market.
The capital market. I can say confidently that the Nigerian Stock Exchange, for instance, is getting its feet back to where it's supposed to be. We are beginning to see some of the effects of some of the changes are coming up properly. I believe that the area we need to put some emphasis on is liquidity. I don't forget that liquidity comes with confidence. If there's a lot of confidence, people will patronize the market. Liquidity will increase. There's a new initiative that is going to start in a couple of weeks, the market making initiative. I know a lot of people will say that we've heard this before, but when it was being promoted before, there were certain things that were not taken with it, which means it cannot happen.
Okay, so there's hope for the capital market.
Let
me, you mentioned the banking sector, and I want both Wale and Johnson to make a quick comment. What's your outlook for the banking sector?
Well, I think the prospects of the banking sector has actually improved tremendously. The banks are well capitalized today. They have strong liquidity. They have stronger credit control processes. They have improved risk management standards or framework.
But people will say, the common man on the streets will say, but they are sacking people and they are not lending to us.
You see, the lending to the common man on the street or to the
small business,
small businesses will actually take time because the risk structure of the small business is quite high. If you look at the cost of production for a small-scale operator, it's too high because of the cost of energy.
Okay.
So the banks will not throw away money just because they want to.
They are not social enterprises.
Yes, but
let me take a final comment or a final topic. I'll come to you, Victor, but we spoke about agriculture. Well, what about land reform? And what about, tied to that, agriculture, land, housing? Those are serious problems. Do you have any views?
Well, the Land Use Act is so many years in the making in terms of reform. We've had this since the Obasanjo regime, and nothing actually has happened. I think that would need to be speeded up.
So we need to focus on land reform.
Exactly, and there must be, we must strip it of all the bureaucracy and undue focus on revenue growth to government so that there can be easy access.
So what you're saying is that land is now seen primarily as a source of revenue for government rather than as a factor of production.
Correct.
Well, I think one of the critical issues is that under the current Land Use Act, the smallholder units make commercial agriculture almost impossible. We need to reform the Land Use Act so that people can have access to large expanse of land for commercial agricultural production. There's no way you will engage in commercial agriculture and get equipment to work on a land that is less than 200, 300 hectares. If you have a holding of 5 hectares, you will never be able to achieve economies of scale. And
but don't we also need the small farmers?
Yeah, we need,
we're going to deal with
the small farmers to work with
larger farmers.
But we need the large farmers to make agriculture a viable business venture in Nigeria.
On that note of making Nigeria itself a viable country and of making the economy reflect on the lives of our people and affect poverty and unemployment, thank you for being with us. We'll be right back.
Let's have the facts on the table. Add excellence, analysis, and insight, and what you have is sound policy. Best analysts, deep thinkers, knowledgeable guests, major channels, all exploring economy, policy, development in Nigeria, Africa, and the world. Not just criticism, that's easy. What are the alternatives? What are the choices and the answer? Independent and objective analysis made simple so everyone can understand. Coming to you live from Lagos, the capital of Africa. Watch out.
This is the Policy Council with Opeyemi Agbaje. You're welcome to the Policy Council. In this segment, I have Bismarck Rewane with me. He's, of course, a reputable economist, financial analyst, managing director of financial derivatives. Bismarck and I will be exploring the environment of policy, global Nigerian, and trying to profile solutions. So let's start with the global environment, Bismarck. In 2012, what factors from the outside world do you think should concern us in Nigeria?
The way I try to describe it is, what are the variables that will define Nigeria's economic destiny externally? The first item, obviously, is the global oil markets. The global oil markets, as we see them today, are in imbalance. Why? Because of what's happening in Iran and the fallout of what happened in Libya. So that's an issue. After the global oil markets, the general level of commodity prices will be the second variable. The third variable will be the number of elections. 54% of the world is going to have elections this year. All the way from Russia, which you have seen, down to the United States in November, China. So the elections, the fallout of the Arab Spring, that is the changes that are taking place as a result of people who are actually resisting the status quo and who want change at all levels. That is one.
Let's take global oil prices.
Yes.
Yes, we've seen an upward direction because of Iran and all of that.
Yes.
Do you think that upward rise is sustainable?
Well, let me put it in perspective. One is the fact that we are at about $127 a barrel Brent, which are on Bonny, and 106 Western Texas Intermediate. The difference between the two is actually about $21, which is very wide. Two is that the fact that Iran controls 5% of world oil reserves and about 8% of world oil production. Not only that, the Strait of Hormuz also opens up the transportation of Iraqi oil. So altogether, we have about 15% of the world's oil in either jeopardy or in play. Now, if there was a problem today, when we had a Libyan problem, 1.6 million barrels of the 42 million barrels in the world OPEC supply was removed. Now we'll be having about twice that amount, which is about 3.1 or 3.2 million barrels. That means that oil price could go as high as $134 a barrel. Don't forget, the current price is the highest point we've had since 2008. And before 2008, we got to $148 a barrel, and it stayed for 3 months. My guess is that what's going to happen to Iran is a lot of rhetoric. I don't think there'll be any attack, because I don't think we can afford an attack in Iran. The consequences are too dire for us to even contemplate. So apart from the theoretical abstractions, the reality is that the oil price is not going to stay at 126. I would say that the average oil price, as the year goes on, maybe around May, June, will come down to about 110, probably down to $100.
So the Nigerian budget is not in danger in any way?
No, the Nigerian benchmark price is not actually the budget. The budget is actually how much actually comes in. The reality is that the difference between what you estimate to spend and what you spend are two different things. I think that the break-even price at which Nigeria's fiscal revenues are equal to its fiscal costs is maybe somewhere at about $80 a barrel at this point. And it begins to, and if you add other leakages to the system, it could be as high as 105, 110. Once the price of oil gets to $100, we begin to think of making adjustments. Some of the adjustments are official, some of them are unofficial. The unofficial adjustments are always the last. That is, the last thing to be sacrificed is the graft in the system. The first thing to be sacrificed are the people's comfort.
We have this double-edged sword in which when oil prices go up, we're happy on the revenue side, but then we have a subsidy that continues to expand. How do you see that interplay playing out, especially in the light of our recent experience with the subsidies?
Well, the reality is that as an oil-producing country, the subsidy shouldn't be the real issue. In fact, the subsidy shouldn't be there in the first place. So you know, that's an argument for another day. But the reality is that the upside from the revenue should far outweigh whatever cost. Because what do we import? Maybe 300,000 barrels a day. What do we export? About 1.6 million barrels. Net, we're in the money. But everything boils down to how efficiently you can manage that process.
You're welcome back, and I still have Bismarck with me. Bismarck, let's go domestic now. Yeah. What are your thoughts about economic indicators and sectors in 2012? Well,
the real issue is that when we assume that, say, the oil price rose in an average of, say, $110 a barrel. Now we are producing 2.2, 2.3. It means the budget is not threatened. Now what happens? The first thing you have to decide is how you're going to share the revenue. I do not think there'll be any change in the revenue allocation formula. Therefore, the federal government gets 45%, the states gets 35%, and local governments get their balance. Having said that, there are two major issues of policy. One is fiscal. How do we spend the money, and how efficiently are we going to spend it? And secondly, how do we maintain monetary policy stability as far as the central bank is concerned in terms of interest rates, exchange rate, and the reserves? Now let's take fiscal policy very quickly. Expenditure is going to be up marginally. Revenues are going to be up because we've had this windfall. And state government revenues are also going to be on the increase. The other hand is that expenditure is going to increase. Why? Because there is greater awareness and people are expecting more. After the Occupy Nigeria movement of January, people's expectations are relatively high. So the budget has been revised upwards, fiscal expenditure and all that is going to be high. There's also the trade policy in terms of the levies and things which will kick in, and also the tax and tariff policy, tariff for electricity, and then the levy for rice, for maize, for rice, for wheat, and brown rice.
So we're going to have an inflationary year?
Well, not really. The costs are going to go up, but can you transfer this cost to people when their discretionary income has come down is another issue. So manufacturers are not being able to pass on cost increases in terms of prices fully. That's on the fiscal side. Monetary policy, we've had an increase in price inflation. First cut was 12.6%. We think that next month we'll have another 1% or 1.5%, maybe 13.5%. With some luck, maybe bad luck 14, good luck 13.5. We close out there. Central bank wait and see. Central bank will probably not increase interest rates initially because the exchange rate has moved more towards equilibrium. The external reserves are actually growing. So I am not too worried about monetary stability in the short run. But if fiscal policy is very loose, then the central bank will have to now respond, not only in reaction, but also in anticipation, because there are other issues that will come. The AMCOM bonds are going to mature in another 12 to 18 months. And so you have to get ready to absorb all that liquidity into the system. Having said that, so what do you face? Sectors are going to be confronted with three major challenges. One, a reduction in discretionary income because people are now paying 50% more for petrol. They're poorer. They're paying for tolls on the Lekki Expressway in Lagos. They're also paying for more electricity, and also the exchange rate. Taxes, and also the exchange rate has actually depreciated from 149 to 156. So in all, the total withdrawals from the system are probably about almost $12 to $15 billion on a $247 billion economy. Having said that, now, which of these goods are those that are inelastic enough for you to pass on price increases, or which are those that are elastic enough that you have to absorb them? Those are the key issues. So let's take the sectors one after the other. The fast-moving consumer goods, definitely these guys have been hit by lower discretionary income. What do they have to do? They have to increase volume. If they increase volume, they increase their average revenues.
There's no capacity for increased volume anyway.
Well, but it is true. What you do is that you price yourself aggressively. The marginal players will not be able to actually compete. So what you're going to see is that consolidation will take place in that industry. You're going to see Unilever, Nigerian Breweries, Guinness, Nestle, and others.
Let's talk about agriculture quickly before we close this. There's a lot of policy talk around the agri sector now. How do you see some of the ideas that Dr. Adesina is articulating?
I like his ideas. The thing about agriculture is structural. It takes time.
Exactly.
It takes a long time before you see the results, and before people believe the results are sustainable. You could have a good harvest, and that's only 1 year. So they need to be encouraged, the policies have to be supported, and it's saying the right things.
How about the financial sector? The growth rate of the sector is declining, the sector is shrinking from the GDP figures I saw.
Yes. There's a time lag between policy and effect. Now, the policies have come in. We've seen the expansionary policy of 2004, when we increased our capital, when Soludo was there, led to growth in the sector. Now, the policy variables that came in 2009 in terms of sanitization also led to shrinking.
Risk management, corporate
right, and now the people are moving. Sanitization led to stabilization. Stabilization now led to some further consolidation and then growth. We are in that stage of further consolidation and growth. I'm not concerned. I think that the financial sector is going to grow. Why do I say that? Because the cashless economy actually reduces the time for payment and settlement, makes it more efficient. The International Financial Reporting Standard makes sure that ensures
what you
that
see
the numbers,
is what you get.
What you see is what you get. And then global best practice, because Nigerian banks are also represented across jurisdictions. Therefore, I think the financial sector is in for surprising growth rather than further consolidation.
I think I'd like to have you back one day to talk in more detail about the financial sector, but thank you very much, Bismarck, for coming. It's been my pleasure having you.
Let's have the facts on the table. Add excellence, analysis, and insight, and what you have is sound policy. Best analysts, deep thinkers, knowledgeable guests, major channels, all exploring economy, policy, development in Nigeria, Africa, and the world. Not just criticism, that's easy. What are the alternatives? What are the choices and the answer? Independent and objective analysis made simple so everyone can understand. Coming to you live from Lagos, the capital of Africa. Watch out.
This is the Policy Council with Opeyemi Agbaje. That has been the program today. GDP growth is good, and the Nigerian economy has been growing. But we all know it has not been inclusive. Poverty and unemployment have not been reduced. To get inclusive growth, it's clear from the discussions of today, you need a better agricultural sector, a more modernized one. You need power so that manufacturing and other sectors can work and employ people. You need consistency of policy, especially in agriculture, where we have some possibly sensible proposals in terms of policy outlines. All of these are part of the debate, and we must continue this debate so that policy can work in Nigeria for Nigerians. I'm Opeyemi Agbaje. See you next time.